Great, fantastic. Well, hello everybody. Thank you for joining the session titled Cultures, and we've got 5 papers today. All right, great. Well, Kirk has got his slides ready, so over to you.
Thanks, Marco. Thanks everyone for coming along. So basically today, what I'm going to do is introduce a recently published paper of ours that presents a narrative review, the psychosocial risks and benefits of engaging with heavy metal music, and with particular focus on music with aggressive themes. So with the emergence and continued popularity of music that explores aggressive and violent antisocial themes, so especially in rap and heavy metal, the focus of today's talk, ongoing societal concerns still exist from community groups, parents, and politicians who worry that exposure to music with aggressive themes might negatively impact upon the behavior and mental health of its fans. There we go. So when claims are made, for example, that heavy metal music with aggressive themes causes psychological and behavioral problems, correlational evidence is often incorrectly cited. And this, of course, happens a fair bit alongside violent video games after tragic mass shootings, particularly over in the US. So given this societal context and also a range of other motivating factors, we set out to source and synthesize correlational and causal studies into a narrative review focusing on the potential risks and benefits of heavy metal music, again with particular focus on aggressive themes. My co-author, Josephine Terry, is now a clinical psychologist after doing her PhD over at Mark's a while back. So given her clinical interest, she was also interested in organising this literature with the aim of potentially informing clinical strategies that address fans' mental health concerns. So the literature search drew from PRISMA guidelines using a range of databases, and we ended up with 101 empirical papers. There we go, sorry. And basically what came out of it was a comprehensive synthesis of research investigating links between heavy metal music and externalizing, internalizing, and unhealthy behaviors, including aggression, anger, substance use, anxiety, depression, and suicide. We also looked at individual factors such as personality, gender, and emotion regulation strategies that potentially moderate these links. And also what came out of it was a focus on how fans may benefit from listening to heavy metal music with aggressive themes. Some of the key findings in terms of risks were that heavy metal fandom and listening habits may be associated with some psychological and behavioral problems. And these were aggression, substance use, disrespect towards women and societal norms, and greater vulnerability to mood disturbances, such as anxiety and depression. However, overall, there is little empirical reason to conclude that heavy metal music actually causes these problems. And not surprisingly, there were a range of moderating factors, such as personality and gender. For example, sensation seeking partially accounts for antisocial behavior and substance use, but perhaps not surprisingly. More interestingly, the literature suggests that female fans are more likely to report poor mental health relative to male fans, and we can chat about that in question time if you like. On the other hand, we found that heavy metal music with aggressive themes can confer a range of psychosocial benefits for its fans, and these include a host of positive emotional response to the music, as well as regulation of negative moods. Can also play a crucial role, in particular for adolescents and young adults, in the formation of identity, facilitation of autonomy, as well as the strengthening of social bonds. And for a case in point, our recent experimental work at Macquarie University on music and violence has shown that fans of extreme metal with violent themes, such as death metal, so extremely violent themes, are not antisocial individuals who use violence in music as a way of supporting or amplifying aggressive or antisocial tendencies. So on the contrary, fans consistently report emotional experiences such as empowerment, joy, and even peacefulness after listening to violent death metal, rather than feelings of increased anger and hostility. And we've replicated this a number of times now. Fans often report using the violence and aggression in the music as a way of working through their own anger and frustration in a safe and non-violent context. And actually, in experiments, it's the non-fans who are recruited into these studies who report significant increases in anger, tension, and even fear. And of course, the non-fans are the people least likely to listen to the music in the real world. So to conclude, the review paper provides large organisation and synthesis of the literature with findings that enhance our understanding of the affective, cognitive, behavioural, and social implications of heavy metal with aggressive themes. If you're interested, it's now published open access in Current Psychology, so please check it out. And we do hope that eventually the findings will trickle down into real world applications, such as informing clinical strategies that address fans' mental health concerns, among many others. And that's it. Thanks for your attention.
To our next paper, which is presented by Merrick and titled Passion, Music and Psychological Wellbeing in Fans of Violently Themed Music. So Merrick, yeah, great. You're sharing the screen. Here you go. Thanks very much.
Great, thanks, Marco. And yeah, going to be discussing some very related research, obviously looking at passion for music and how it influences psychological well-being for fans of violently themed music. And yeah, this is work I've done with Kirk, as well as my other supervisor, Bill Thompson, and another collaborator, Bob Valorant. So as Kirk discussed just then, violently themed music, or kind of part of what Kirk discussed, was that violently themed music can serve a range of positive psychosocial functions for its fans, even despite these kind of ongoing concerns that parent groups, governments, and so on have. Positive affective responses like the joy and empowerment, social bonding benefits, mood regulation benefits, and other things like self-reflection and identity benefits. Other research has also shown that fans of violently themed music, and just, I guess I'll preface by saying these are people who self-identify as fans of music containing overt violent themes, also don't show any evidence of desensitization to visual or auditory signals of threat. However, there's no research to date on how this fandom might contribute to one's kind of general psychological well-being. And for anyone who was in the keynote this morning would have seen a really great kind of depiction of psychological well-being and a great explanation. So our key questions for this study were, what are the implications of passionate fandom for violently themed music on well-being? And can this music facilitate well-being for its fans, even though the content is obviously overtly violent by nature? So having a bit of a throwback to AMPS a couple of years ago, I presented some work that looked at this dualistic model of passion, which details two types of passion that emerge depending on how one person internalizes that kind of activity into their identity. So how one goes from, enjoying violently themed music to identifying as, a death metal fan or a metalhead or whatever it might be. And harmonious passion is often associated with adaptive outcomes because a person kind of integrates the activity into their personality purely to the kind of fulfillment, joy, benefits it provides. There's nothing kind of attached to that fandom. Whereas obsessive passion, by contrast, is where a person kind of integrates this passion into their identity with attached pressure, be it to fit in, or they're over kind of relying the activity to provide them a sense of self-esteem and certain things like that. So it's not kind of purely for the benefits that the activity provides. So what we did in AMPS2020, which is now currently under review, I think is maybe where this paper's gotten to, is we looked at these relationships for fans of music of all different genres. So there was up to 40 different genres that people reported. And using a kind of path analysis, we looked at the relationships between the two types of passion, positive and negative affective experiences with music, and then how that might relate to well-being or ill-being. And we did find support for those. So what this study did was use the same method essentially to explore these relationships, but only with people who self-identified as fans of music containing violent themes. And so we got 177 people recruited either online or by first year sample, because it is often quite hard to find someone who self-identifies that way. In the interest of time, I'll kind of move quickly through the measures, but here is what we used, the passion scale developed by Bob Vallerand, our collaborator, various measures of well-being and ill-being that became composite measures in the path analysis, and the scale of positive and negative affective experience. This was an online survey and participants completed the kind of initial measures and then were asked to think about a genre of music that they love, that contains violent themes, that they identify with, strongly value, and spend a lot of time listening to. They then reported that genre and completed the passion scale and affective experiences in relation to that genre. So there was no listening task in this study, but essentially, what do these kind of music generally bring up for you and that sort of thing. So we did the same kind of path analysis here. And if you look at the kind of main blocks in the middle, you'll see that harmonious passion predicted positive experience with music, which predicted psychological well-being, and that kind of fully mediated that relationship. As you can see, the path between harmonious passion and well-being was no longer significant. And at the bottom, you can see that obsessive passion predicted negative experiences, which predicted psychological ill-being, but that only kind of partially mediated their obsessive passion and still did predict psychological well-being in that original path. We also found a relationship between hours of music listened to per week and psychological ill-being, which was not predicted. So harmonious passion for violently themed music did predict positive experiences of music, which in turn predicted psychological well-being. And this supports this idea of kind of spiral up well-being that is quite common in the positive psychology literature, where frequent positive experiences with an activity can increase one's attentional resources and then allow them to engage with the activity in a more positive way, kind of snowballing towards adaptive outcomes. We saw a similar thing for obsessive passion, negative experiences and psychological ill-being, which shows the negative impacts of obsessive passion and the real importance of understanding this as a risk factor for maladaptive outcomes for engaging with music, and kind of touched a little bit on what you were asking, Kirk, at the end there. So this kind of point that I think is potentially the most interesting out of this study is that individual factors such as the nature for one's passion for music appear more influential in predicting psychological well-being outcomes than the content or valence of the lyrical themes. And I suppose we're now thinking the implications for what this might mean about people trying to censor violently themed music, and if there's any implications for the broader concerns that the public and government things may have. And thank you very much.
So we'll move to our next presenter, which is Bethan. And Bethan, if you could please share your screen. Bethan's paper is titled Music in a Time of Isolation, Aesthetic and Social Responses to Live-Streamed, Recorded, and In Situ Live Western Classical Music Performance. Over to you.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, everyone. So yes, this is a presentation overviewing preliminary findings from a project that I've undertaken, looking at these contrasts between audience group responses to live Western classical music performance online and in situ. So the impetus for this project is really the changes that have been occurring in society during and in the wake of COVID-19, that we're watching many more concerts online than we were beforehand. And so it's kind of looking at what are the ramifications of this change. So when we watch in situ, when we're in the same room as the musicians and the other audience members, we're sharing a space together. Whereas when we're online, we're separated, we're in different spatial settings. And does this impact on our responses to the music? And so that's the aim of this project, was to compare these two audience member groups and to see if being separated in this way, being online and in situ, affected the aesthetic and social responses. When looking at how to measure an experience of music, an aesthetic experience, in the literature review I did, I only found 6 models that kind of outline a holistic view of this experience. The 3 most influential are on the screen here. But from those 6 overall, the view is that there are kind of 3 main inputs. There's the listener, there's the music, obviously the composition and the musicians, and the context. So this is the social and cultural context in which the music is heard. And for this project, obviously, the performance context is also key, whether it's online and in person. And then the models put forward that there were 3 key responses, emotional responses to the music, an evaluative judgment and a kind of aesthetic judgment about the performance, and we can make many of those, and preferences. So our liking for the composition and the performance. That this is kind of the model of what an experience of music entails. And so this model has informed the kind of a methodological approach for the project. And in terms of the method, this project actually has 2 phases, and I'm presenting the findings from phase 1 here, and primarily in relation to a questionnaire that we presented to the 2 groups that were involved in the study. And the focus is, it's very pragmatic, trying to look at a live Western classical music performance, a percussion concert. And we presented a questionnaire to the audience groups that they completed before, during, and after the concert. And then we also undertook focus group discussions with those 2 separate groups after the concerts. But here I'm just presenting the findings from the questionnaire. In situ, we had 24 participants who were at the concert and wanted to be involved. And the concert was also live streamed via YouTube, and you could watch it after a recording of it after the concert as well. So we had 17 people who were online who wanted to be involved. The measures that we captured in the questionnaire, well, firstly, aesthetic responses, and these are very much informed from the models that I mentioned previously, but aesthetic judgments, I asked about the considerations of the skill and the expressiveness of the musician's performance, the audience's views on those, their liking for the composition and the performance, so their preferences, their emotional responses. So the previous 2 were kind of Likert scale ratings that the audience gave. But for the emotional responses, I used the GEMIAC checklist of emotions from Coutinho and Scherer, and also added 4 other emotional responses from a study by Lillestrom. And then I also asked the audiences about the intensity of their emotional responses and how engaging they found the performances. In terms of the social responses, there's very little research that looks at social responses to live music, but the key one that comes through both for online and in situ is social connection. So here I've asked about the audience's sense of social connection to the musicians and to the audience members in situ and online. And so the results. Firstly, the aesthetic responses. So I undertook a t-test in SPSS to compare the means from the kind of aggregated overall response for these key variables. So an overall concert response. And of these 4 variables that you can see here, I'll move forward. The only one that was not significantly different between the online and in situ groups was preference. So their liking for the composition and their liking for the musicians' performances was not different between the groups, significantly different. Whereas the in situ audience members found the performances much more engaging than the online groups did. They also gave much more positive judgments of the performances, of the skill and the musicianship, the expressiveness, sorry. And they found them kind of more intense emotionally. They had stronger emotional responses. In terms of that GEMIAC scale of emotional responses, you can see here on the left is the online audience, and on the right is the in situ audience. And this is after each piece, they selected the emotional responses that they felt to the piece. And so this graph shows from the least selected emotional response overall through the concert to the most selected. And if I highlight some, I guess the key one is that for the online audience, 20% of those responses were that they felt no emotional response throughout the concert, whereas in situ only 3% said that they felt no emotional response to a piece. Also, if you look at the in situ audience here, the top 2 chosen responses were energetic, lively, and happy and elated, whereas online it was, as I said, none, and interested, expectant. So a slightly different kind of experience in terms of the top 2. Also in terms of indifferent bored, online it was a slightly higher percentage, 5% versus in situ. And then the social responses. So the sense of connection to the musicians for both audience groups, so online and in person, was much stronger. So a much stronger sense of connection to the people performing than to those that you're experiencing the music with. But between the two groups, the in situ audience felt a much stronger sense of social connection to the musicians than the online participants did. Similarly, the sense of connection to the audience members in situ was much stronger in situ than it was for those who were watching online. The only one that was not significantly different between the two groups was the sense of connection to the audience members online. Both groups felt some sense of connection to those online, but it was not a significant difference. So the conclusions and implications are that an in situ experience of live music is more engaging, the aesthetic judgments are more positive, the emotional responses are more intense, and the sense of social connection is stronger. And that online, I mean, that key figure, I guess, is that 20% of the responses said they had no emotional response to pieces. However, the online participants still experienced a wide range of these key variables. They still had likings and emotional responses and made positive judgments. So it was still a wide-ranging aesthetic experience. The limitations of the study are that it's a small sample size. It was just 2 turned up on the day, and that it's only been on 1 concert. So it's, you know, we'd have to make sure that these results could be replicated in other studies. And also that the study presents a kind of a very generalized overview of 2 groups, when of course the individual experiences are much more complex and varied. So you could have someone in situ who has a much less positive experience than someone online. But this is just obviously an overview. And the implications are that context matters, that when you're looking at studying audience members' responses to music, that it's important to consider the context, social, cultural, and obviously online and in situ, because it has an impact on all the other responses that are experienced by the audience groups. And I guess also that perhaps, you know, if this was able to be replicated, then there would be ramifications for organizations, performers and venues looking and investing in online platforms, and they'd possibly have to think what kind of experiences they're wanting to provide for their audience members. Obviously, this would be balanced on trying to perhaps reach those who are in more remote locations. So there are benefits on both sides. But I think it's important to consider that, you know, in this case, the experience was less rich online. And finally, I think that there's definitely room for more research in this space in terms of how audiences experience live music in these different performance contexts. I didn't focus very specifically on the live stream compared to the in situ, but that's definitely an avenue that could be explored more, and definitely the social responses. So thank you for listening.
All right, moving on to our 4th paper today, which is presented by our brilliant Kaila. So Kaila, I think you definitely know what you're doing here to share your slides. And this paper is a paper with Kaila and Amanda Krause, titled Influence of Individual Differences on Perceptions of Hypothetical Rap Music Fans.
So good afternoon, my name is Kaila, and I'll be presenting on, as Mark said, the influence of individual differences on perceptions of hypothetical rap music fans. So rap, especially the subgenre gangster rap, is considered problem music. So it's largely perceived to promote hostility and violence to its listenership. And rap genre stereotyping can also inform other associations. So this can be negative dispositional inferences to the genre's authors, as well as the fans of the genre. And studies have found that rap fans and lyricists are seen as aggressive and as associated with criminality. One important mechanism contributing to the racial disparities in the United States criminal justice system may be the seemingly race-neutral practice of presenting defendant-authored rap lyrics as evidence of guilt during criminal trials. And the defendant-authored rap lyrics can be presented as evidence of character, motive, or even confession. So our study was a modified replication of an experiment that was conducted by Stuart Fishoff in 1999, which examined the prejudicial influence of exposure to gangster rap lyrics on mock jurors' character judgments of a rapper on trial for murder. So Fishoff found that participants rated the male as significantly more capable of murder, and as having other negative personality traits such as dishonesty when presented alongside violent and misogynistic lyrics. Participants in all 4 conditions of fish of study were presented with the biographical description of an African-American male, which is shown here in the second paragraph. Participants in the first condition were simply shown the description. The second condition contained the accusation of murder, which is presented below. The third provided inflammatory gangster rap lyrics that was said to be authored by the target. And the last condition contained both the accusation of murder as well as the inflammatory rap lyrics. So our aim was to investigate the impact of music preference on inferences of criminal propensity and personality, and also to examine whether the target's gender would influence participant ratings. So we had 305 United States and Australian participants who completed our study, and they were exposed to the same conditions in a between subjects questionnaire design. However, the lyrics were presented as being from the target's favorite song as opposed to authored by them, as it was in fish of study, and we also manipulated the gender of the target. So when presented alongside violent and misogynistic rap lyrics, participants rated the fan as significantly more sexually aggressive, capable of murder and being a gang member, and as substantially more unlikable. So these results were consistent with Fishoff's, despite the target being presented as merely a fan of the lyrics and not having authored them. Gender of the fan did not significantly impact participants' ratings, and this may be due to the prevalence of masculine language and female objectification that's expressed in the lyrics of both male and female rappers of the genre. Additionally, some questions also concerned participants' individual traits, such as their music preference. That's our second question asked. Do participants' individual differences influence how they perceive the hypothetical rap music fans' associations with criminality when presented alongside these inflammatory lyrics? So the presence of rap lyrics, as well as the participants' global rap scores, so these were how positive the participants perceived the rap genre to be. So for instance, viewing it as empowering relative to misogynistic and offensive. Were found to be significant moderators of how capable of murder the participant perceived the rap fan to be. So as we see in this graph, in the conditions where the accusation of murder was absent, so the blue lines, participants with low global rap scores or a more negative view of rap rated the rap fan as significantly more capable of murder when presented alongside the inflammatory rap lyrics. Participants here in the second graph with moderate global rap scores or a more neutral view of rap music also rated the rap fan as significantly more capable of murder when presented alongside the gangster rap lyrics. But we do see that there's less of an incline relative to that first graph. And lastly, for participants with high global rap scores, so this would be a very positive view of rap music, for instance, viewing it as empowering and artistic. There was no significant difference between the ratings of the rap fans' capability to commit murder when presented alongside those inflammatory lyrics. Interestingly, a preference for rap music was not a significant moderator in this model. Overall, these findings have important implications for the pervasiveness of rap-related stereotypes by illustrating that rap genre preference and not authorship may be sufficient to prejudicially impact character judgments in legal settings. Furthermore, it also appears that the more positively an individual views the rap genre, the less likely they are to attribute these negative stereotypes, such as criminality, to an individual that is associated with the genre. Therefore, it is crucial to consider the social constraints and artistic conventions influencing the genre and source expert testimony to educate judges and jurors on the interpretation of these lyrics and their admissibility and credibility in legal settings. Thank you very much.
So we're going to move now to our last paper for the day, which is from Campbell. Campbell, if you could kindly share your screen with us, and I'm going to also ask you to put your mic a bit up or closer to the mic, if that's okay.
All right, well, hi there, guys. My name is Campbell Briggs. I'm a fourth-year psychology student at Cook University. At university, and this is an overview of my honors research project, Lover or Traitor, comparing playlists curated for love-related contexts. I want to give a quick shout out to Dr. Amanda Krause and thank her for her excellent supervision during this process. So researchers understand that music, like many things in our environment, is an auditory stimulus. But Rabin and Russell came up with their theory of environmental psychology that all stimuli elicit emotional responses at various levels in 3 dimensions: pleasure, arousal, and dominance. Just a quick brief overview. Pleasure can be described as positive feelings that are generated by a stimulus, but stems to more than just liking something. Arousal is how much one feels stimulated, alert, or active in their environment. And dominance has been referred to as feeling unrestricted or free to act in a variety of ways. Music is no exception to this rule. The levels of these PAD dimensions for music can shift as the listening context changes, as Krauss and North found in their previous study, where higher arousal music was preferred for situations where a person was exercising, while less arousing music was preferred for situations like meditation. For our study, we looked at 2 situations and playlists curated based on those 2 situations, which were romance and breakup. It was hoped that music choices would be described using adjectives that reflect those PAD dimensions. The aim of the study was to understand the difference in music preference via the PAD dimensions between 2 opposing love-related playlists. It was hypothesized that the situations would differ in terms of the PAD dimensions, with the potential for higher pleasure in the romance situation. It was also hypothesized that the music in each playlist would be described via adjectives that signify the context in which it would be experienced, and that the music with high PAD dimensions would be associated with relevant adjectives, and the same for low levels of the PAD dimensions. We had a large sample of 900 participants with an age range of 17 to 66, guided through volunteering, or if they were psychology students at JCU, they could complete our survey for credit points. The survey, which was expected to be completed in 20 to 30 minutes, was created through Qualtrics and distributed online. Participants were asked to describe their song choices for each playlist using given adjectives on 7-point Likert scales. This was similar for selecting appropriate adjectives for the situations, which had 6 items for each of the PAD dimensions, also using 7-point Likert scales, to allow for a range of responses from the most negative to the most positive aspect of that dimension. For example, unhappy to happy for the pleasure dimension. Between the 2 situations themselves of romance and breakup, it seems that all 3 PAD dimensions had a statistically significant difference, and that higher scores for all dimensions were seen in the romance situation, with pleasure having the largest mean score difference, as you can see in the table. Thus, our first hypothesis was supported, and the results signify that the romance situation generates more positive feelings, higher arousal states, and more feelings of being in control in comparison to the breakup situation. From the factor analysis conducted of the playlist descriptors, there were 4 overlapping themes present, as you can see here: nostalgia, serene, arousing, and melancholy. Funnily enough, there was actually an overlap of these themes with the work of Krauss and North in 2018. It was later inferred that the arousing theme represented the arousal dimension, while the serene and melancholy themes represented the positive and negative aspects, respectively, of the pleasure dimension. However, there was no theme to represent dominance, and nostalgia could not fill this role. Our second hypothesis was at least mostly supported, since 2 of the 3 dimensions were reflected by adjectives used to describe the music. Using paired samples t-tests and a non-parametric equivalence, Wilcox and Sider rank tests, we found statistically significant differences between the opposing playlists for the themes from the factor analysis that related to the PAD dimensions. The serene and arousing themes were much preferred in the romance playlist, while melancholy was much preferred in the breakup playlist. Interestingly, there was no significant difference between the average nostalgia scores between playlists. Therefore, our third hypothesis was also supported. However, this does exclude the dominance dimension. Pleasure and arousal levels between playlists reflect the situational context that they are based on, which reflects back to our second hypothesis and the results of the comparisons between the situations themselves. Obviously, more research is needed to find more conclusive results in the dominance dimension, which has always been a past struggle in research on contextual music listening. We also did not get to look into discrepancies caused by individual differences, such as gender or age, and how they may influence PAD levels. For future research, it is recommended to look into the qualitative reasoning behind why certain dimensions are preferred in one playlist over another, as well as the motivations behind this, such as aiming for mood regulation or enhancing an already felt emotion. Specific song choices should also be thoroughly analyzed, as well as specific features such as the genre. Thank you so much for listening, guys, and here are my references.
I would like to thank all of our 5 presenters today, starting from Kirk, of course, Merrick, and Bethan, Kaila, and Campbell. Thank you so much for joining the session, and thanks once again to all of you, and we'll see you soon. Congratulations to you all.